Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the EV edition, our weekly Tuesday morning electric vehicle discussion. And we've got a few things to cover with you today. I'm Pete Gruber.
Mark Schaffner. Good morning. Welcome, everybody.
And Jesse, can you throw up a picture for us? We're going to show you that Hell just got a Supercharger.
And I think hell just froze over as well.
And what we're going to pop up here is, this is the Supercharger in Hell, Norway, spelled just like the one from the Bible.
That's right.
And yeah, it's we're going to talk a little bit later about all of this news and FUD about cold and Teslas and EVs in general, and problems charging. There's a lot of that is fake news and some of it is real, but there's a workaround. And while we're throwing pictures of cold things up, let's throw up another picture, which is Snow Won't Melt. And this one, it had me stymied when I first looked at it because there wasn't a caption. And I thought, of course, I know what he's trying to say. There's a Tesla Model S, of course, in a frigid environment. It looks like he's been driving for a while. Mm-hmm. And if you notice, there's snow on the hood.
That's right, I do.
When have you ever seen snow on the hood of an ICE vehicle that's been driving for a while?
Well, you don't. The engine's always there to heat up the hood. And
there's actually steam that comes off sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In this particular Tesla, if you look at the door, I was impressed because it's been driven 1.1 million miles.
Yeah, this is Hans von, and I wish I can pronounce his last name, a German Tesla owner that has been breaking records by putting high mileage on his Teslas. Started with a Tesla Roadster, actually, and it's in kilometers typically. He reaches 1 million kilometers, and then he's going, oh my God. Remember, that's only like 600,000 miles.
Oh, still.
So it's still impressive, though, yes.
Yeah, he talks about 1.9 million kilometers or 1.1 million miles, and he's a taxi driver.
Yeah.
Drives his car somewhere around 400 or 500 miles a day.
Yeah. Have another picture to throw up here. This one is for global EV production. And while he's bringing that up, for those of you that are thinking of chiming in, please do so. Let us know where you're coming in from. We can see if you're Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And, feel free to join us, debate with us, add some content, and would love to hear from you. This is a 2022 statistic, and I think Mark has a little more information on this than I do.
Yeah, a little bit more. The BYD number looks a little bit bigger than Tesla here because this includes plug-in electric hybrid vehicles as well as battery EVs. BYD surpassed Tesla's production in 2023 in EV only as well. And Tesla was up close to 2 million. Overall, in 2023, 14.1 million cars were sold. Mm-hmm. And so that's up from the 10.3 million that are listed there in 2022. Growth rate is supposed to be at least that much in 2024.
So the disruption continues and continues to gain momentum.
It sure does. Looks like there'll be about 18 million electric vehicles sold in 2024, and 22 million are projected in 2025.
Mm-hmm. And another image, if we can throw up the NACS image, was some guesswork on our part whether the NACS standard would be adopted in the automotive industry. We badly needed a standard.
Oh, yes.
And then the first one came along. What was the first one, by the way?
I think Ford was the first one to adopt the standard. Tesla announced it. It went several months. Everybody ignored it. They're like, yeah, whatever. Tesla's got their plugs, and they're just trying to do this marketing thing. And then suddenly Ford said, we're going to go ahead and adopt that standard.
Right. Now, there's a century-old company that is jumping on the bandwagon, and we then thought, wow, this could be like dominoes.
Yeah.
And then it was, and they started to drop. Well, this chart gives you an idea who the holdouts are. And if you notice to the right there are a few adoptees in there as well, like Mazda and Lucid. So the chart hadn't been updated. But we should probably talk about the ones that haven't yet. Like Stellantis is a pretty big one, and I'm surprised.
Yeah, in fact, I would go so far as to say Stellantis is the last major domino. Everyone else has pretty much fallen. Fiat makes a fair number of electric vehicles. Jeep has they're starting to advertise their 4xe vehicle, which is kind of a new take on a hybrid. You tell the car if you want to go in gasoline mode or electric only mode or a switch of both. But that means, Stellantis is the only real major player on the market. You've got VinFast. Down here, you've got Canoe. Down here, what is that? Fisker?
That's Faraday Future
Faraday.
down below there. And then
so those are all really, really minor players. Once Stellantis gets on board, that's pretty much everybody at that point.
now I don't see Lamborghini on here. I see Ferrari. Did they just leave them off this list, or are they a subset of one of these other larger companies like Stellantis? I don't even know at this point.
Off the top of my head, is
Yeah, they're in the
Lamborghini part
same-
of the VW group?
Yes.
Okay. And VW is in the green section there.
Yeah,
There
they're
we go.
underneath Porsche and next to Bugatti and Scout.
Oh yeah, they are in there. Their logo's in there.
Yeah, look at the VW logo and go straight down. They're across the bottom, just to the right of the Tesla logo.
Okay. There we go.
And so that's
The shield. Yeah.
there's the
I
shield.
looked right past
But yeah,
that.
we've got I'm anxious to see this standard go, and I think I was telling you last week. Both for two reasons. I've got a Volvo, which I can't wait to be able to start charging on a supercharger with my Volvo. I think that's going to be a nice thing to do. I also know that other charging networks are picking up the NACS plugs. So I want to be able to take my Tesla Model S and charge on a non-Tesla network at supercharging or fast charging speeds.
Sure.
Hey, real quick, we have a TikTok question from Brian Weiss. He's saying, what is the cutoff from the other slide? Someone pull that back up real quick. I think he's talking about this one for other. What is the cutoff? Do we know any info on that? I can look into that. This is for the EV production.
We'll have to look into that to see what the what other involves there. I think it involves the combination of all of the others.
And then getting back to the NACS adoption, Ferrari is a holdout, it looks like there, and we have some experience with Ferrari recently. We got a LaFerrari battery repair project.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, for those of you interested, we normally work on Tesla Roadster batteries. We've really become superb at repairing those. And, of course, the next generation car, Model S, X, those are fairly easy as well. It's the same technology, 18650 cells, multi-cell, large battery pack, that type of thing. But this was a deviation from what we normally do, so we simply turned our engineering talent to this LaFerrari battery, which was a lot smaller than a Model S, because the LaFerrari is a hybrid. And this battery's function in life is to augment, not to do primary propulsion.
Okay.
There's still a 12-cylinder engine in there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But so we were working on this battery. We found two problems with it. And the first thing that astonished us was, even though this battery is about a quarter the size of a Tesla Roadster battery, which nowadays is $45,000, by the way,
Right.
for a
Right.
replacement, this much smaller battery was $300,000. You heard that right. $350,000 for just the battery alone.
Crazy.
And so we worked on it for 2 weeks, did a deep dive. We reverse engineered, which is the first thing you have to do if you're going to repair electronics. You have to figure out where the roadmap is. You know,
Right.
where are all the components? Do a bill of materials, identify the etches, the runs. Where does it all interconnect? How does it operate? And anyway, it was fascinating to work on this. And after we got the battery fixed, the guys were driving it up and down the street, and I was instantly reminded why I loved exotic cars. The sound of that car, that 12-cylinder engine winding out up and down our road, was just like a Formula One car. And, you know, the speed transitions and the shifting, and it was just music, total, like a symphony orchestra.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You know, there's nothing quite like the sound of an authentic V8 to
Finely
V12.
tuned, yeah.
When they're finely tuned, they just have that particular, there's a rumble there that people with smaller cars try to mimic, and they just can't.
So one of the reasons I bring all this up, I'm perplexed. I just don't understand how a company that has spent decades building a certain brand and a sound that goes with it, and of course the look and feel, which they can replicate in electric vehicles, but that sound is going to go away. How are they going to transition? And of course, one obvious way was the LaFerrari. Let's leave the cool Formula One sound and make it a hybrid. Well, that's not going to get them where they need to be, because at some point the governments have mandated you can't produce ICE engine cars anymore.
Yeah, and we've seen the same thing with Lamborghini. I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing going on with Maserati, and they're the high-end cars. They're all going the hybrid route as opposed to going the true EV route. And I do think that sound and experience, that there's a certain vibration that you get just from the engine itself.
And then you have McLaren, you have a whole host of others. And, let's not forget the fact that these EV type manufacturers like Tesla have had more than a decade to perfect their technology. As these exotic car manufacturers have had many decades perfecting their exquisite, exotic ICE engines.
Sure.
How are they going to pivot? How are they going to transition into the world of electronics and, battery technology overnight like this? It's going to be very difficult.
It's going to be very difficult. And you've already got people like the Rimac with the Navara car. It is a supercar, and it is a beautiful, all-electric, fast as lightning type of car.
Sure. You know, what often happens when there's a level of disruption like this in an industry, companies go away.
Yeah.
They can't compete. They can't pivot. And nobody wants to see that happen to the well-known trademark names like Lamborghini, Ferrari, McLaren. But there may be casualties.
There may be. I mean, Go back a few generations. How many people see Packards anymore?
Yeah, right.
They've gone away. We have a few items on the question board now. Nick Merckx says hello from Finland.
Finland, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. And Nick, if you have an electric vehicle, I'd love to have you comment on how your driving experience has been in the cold weather. Niels has joined us as well from YouTube. He asks us, isn't Stellantis, like Ford and GM, reducing their EV production?
I don't know if Stellantis is. Ford definitely is, and GM. We've got a report later on that talks about some of this, the statistics, what's really going on. And there may be other reasons other than lack of demand that these companies are scaling somewhat, or scaling back.
I heard a really smart guy talking about forecasting who said, forecasting more than about 12 months out, it doesn't matter how good you are. Typically, a chimpanzee with a dartboard is as good as you.
Right.
And Ford and General Motors and Stellantis, among others, made commitments to be able to build, 250 or 300,000 vehicles back in 2021. They said that we're going to be able to do this in 2024 or 2025.
Right.
Well, the 2024 is here now, and they realize that the pace of demand has slowed down. Ford is having problems moving their Lightning pickup truck. They kind of had if we build it, they will come type of attitude. The dealers jacked up the prices and the free market took hold.
Yeah, took over. Yeah.
And so they've got a great product, but it's not selling at the rate that they anticipated it would. So they had to adjust their forecasts.
Sure. And, there are ripple effects as well. In order to meet these kind of production goals, they had to get commitments to vendors for the raw materials. And when you scale that back and you're not meeting your scheduled purchase order requirements, then the MOQs go up. So the cost goes up. So, I don't want to be in their shoes. It's going to be very difficult, as we've said all along, for these legacy auto manufacturers to flip on the switch and, convert.
It is going to be difficult. Stellantis with their Ram products have announced that they're going to scale back some of the production that they have. And what's hard for that is if you're producing exactly 0 vehicles, what are you scaling back?
Right.
You're still building up production. You're just not building it up quite as fast.
Now, Niels is also saying, don't they do hybrid because it is impossible with today's batteries to get both range and speed? Well, the problem with that, first of all, is that many governments have mandated 2035 seems to be the popular date. You can't produce any more ICE vehicles. So they don't have a choice, really. But the rest of the question is, pure battery electric vehicles would be too heavy for supercars. Well, take a look at the alleged Tesla Roadster number 2. Right? That car is being targeted to have a 600-mile range. It is a small hypercar or supercar. And Tesla was able to, at least from on design, to nail that requirement. So, and with battery technology continuing to improve, that could be another factor.
Oh, we've got the Rimac Navara that's out on the streets right now. That is I would qualify it as a supercar. It is.
Yeah, it does 0 to 60 at 1.74 seconds. The fastest car ever made, outside of like an F1 or something crazier. It has 256 mile an hour top speed, and it's got 300 miles range.
Not bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So the supercars are here. Plus, when we looked at that LFA Ferrari battery, what a marvel of technology that was. I think it was a you'll know for sure, but to me, my impression was that it was a semi-solid state battery, and it was a fifth the size and weight.
Yeah, about the quarter the size of the Tesla Roadster battery.
Of the Tesla Roadster battery,
yeah,
and yet it claimed 100 kilowatts worth of energy in that battery or something like that.
And it was all carbon fiber construction versus the aluminum cast aluminum tub with the steel lid on it, which shaved weight as well.
Yeah.
And it fit into that LaFerrari just like a glove. It was there was a cavity just perfectly designed for that.
It was an engineering marvel.
Yeah.
No question. I could see why it was the $300,000 because of the amount of engineering that had to go into it just to make it work. But the fact is, it was a battery about the fifth the size of a Roadster that could put out 100 kilowatts.
The other remarkable thing is, in a supercar like this, they're not a large, long sedan or SUV. So you don't have as much physical space, but somehow they shoehorned an exotic 12-cylinder engine into that, along with all of its requirements, the high-end exhaust, the tune this and tune that, and an electric drivetrain. To augment, and that was actually what the purpose of that was, is to provide the low-end torque necessary to give it a certain specification. In fact, you know what? If you guys are interested, no, it's in the other podcast. Stay tuned for the Tesla Roadster podcast. In that podcast at 11 o'clock, we're going to talk about the LaFerrari, its specifications, and talk a bit more about the repair that we did on that car.
That'll be a fun conversation. Yeah. Kurt Childs has chimed in and asks, what are your thoughts on solid-state batteries?
A couple of words. The future, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
We were initially, a couple of years ago, we were excited about graphene batteries, and we had a vendor that wanted us to do some testing on a Model S to jam graphene pouches into that car. And it turns out there were some engineering problems on their end that proved to be unworkable for us to do this test. But the bottom line is, in fact, we've got another item here today. Sodium batteries are now a thing.
Oh, yes.
Volkswagen with a Chinese company. And VW, I guess, is the number 3 EV manufacturer, you were saying?
They are. You think of, it made all kinds of waves in the news. BYD is the largest EV manufacturer for battery electric vehicles in the world in 2023. Tesla is the second largest. What many people don't realize is Volkswagen is the third largest. They sold almost 1 million vehicles, battery electric vehicles in 2023.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So my take on the battery technology, brace yourself, because it's a rapidly changing landscape, and it is improving exponentially, virtually. And that's what happens when you have demand like this.
Yeah.
The technology, begins to evolve much more rapidly than if you had low volume production.
I honestly think what we saw in that LFA Ferrari battery is a picture of the future for all cars.
Mm-hmm.
A battery that's smaller, that's lighter, that gets somewhere in that 300 to 500 mile range. I don't think the solid state battery with 1,000 miles of range, those are cool, but I don't think that's where the future's at. Because you're going to have other technologies, fast charging, solar, inductive charging, all those kinds of things that are going to negate the need to have a 1,000-mile battery.
Yeah. We've got a lot of comments. Let's go through some of those. All right. No way we get there. He says Tesla makes more of carbon credit sales than sales of vehicles. I don't know the actual statistics, but there is a lot of support for going carbon neutral.
I know at some point in time in the past that this was the case, that Tesla, most of their profits as recently as 2018 were coming from the sales of carbon credits. Since Tesla became a profitable auto manufacturer, I don't know if that's the case or not, but I would have to look up to find out for sure.
It'd be an interesting thing to research, yeah. Dean Warwick, 461, says, won't even charge here in New York in the cold weather. All right, this is where you go into your cold weather diatribe.
Well, Dean, we were looking at, charging in hell in Norway, and I came across an article with a gentleman who's charging up in Alberta, and it was 31 degrees
minus
31 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 35 degrees centigrade. He was charging his Model Y. He had no problems. He drove on a regular basis every day. He even took his car to 3 different chargers, one Tesla Supercharger and 2 non-Tesla chargers in town, and demonstrated that his car would take full capacity charging from the charger. And he said the key is you've got to precondition the battery. Electric vehicle batteries are meant to work in a certain temperature range. Those temperatures range from somewhere around 50 or so degrees up to about 90 or 95 degrees. That's where their sweet spot is. And these cars are programmed to get the batteries up to that temperature, or in the case of Phoenix in the summertime, down to that temperature. If you're trying to charge outside of that temperature, a lot of the energy that your car is taking in is actually going to either heat up the battery in winter or to cool it down in summer. The key is preconditioning. Preconditioning is simply the process for the car either using a heat pump or using direct heating to the battery cells, expends some of its energy to actually heat the battery so that it will accept the charge properly. It can charge in New York in the cold weather. The gentleman in Alberta said what he did is he would put his car into precondition mode about 45 minutes to an hour before he needed to drive. He could drive fine, he could charge fine, never had a problem. We've got all kinds of people all over the world who have electric vehicles, whether it's Norway, Finland, Sweden, in the Arctic north of Europe, whether it's in Canada, Alaska. These are places that have had cold winters every year for the last 10 years. I can't think of any of them that haven't had at least some cold snaps that have all been able to charge. And it's only this year where we've had people who live in more southern climates who aren't used to, and I use southern with kind of loosely here, who aren't used to the bitter cold weather with EVs, not being educated on how to treat their cars.
You know, with the over-the-air updates that Tesla is able to do, and the fact that the cars have temperature sensors in them, it would seem an easy update to just simply do an alert when someone gets in the car. If you want to charge, you'll need to precondition for X amount of time in order to get a successful charge.
There's one other thing I wanted to include there. You can schedule it. So based on your weekly work schedule or whatever it is, and it should be noted also, Mark, that 45 minutes to an hour is for those extreme negative 30 degree. Normally you have to precondition the battery for 10, 15, 20 minutes max. And you can have that scheduled based on it'll do it in the background without you even knowing it. You don't have to even think about it.
Yeah.
Now, I could understand that when Hertz, for example, bought a bunch of Teslas, and people that were that were renting them weren't familiar with how to drive an EV, how to precondition or any of that. There I could see the problem occurring, but owners should certainly have been educated ahead of time. But
Yeah.
like you're saying, maybe this was a global warming or a climate change issue that just popped up this year, and we haven't had these events before.
I think Chicago's having a colder winter this year with the polar vortex than they've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it happens to be making the press that there are places up north. I granted, if your car is parked outside all night and you don't take time to precondition your battery, you're going to use a lot of energy, and your car's not going to perform the way that you would have expected.
Yeah.
You're also going to have some difficulty charging because your battery is too cold to effectively accept a charge.
And then they were also saying while people were sitting there trying to charge, they were running their heaters, of course, which was compounding the problem.
Yes. We've been cold here in Phoenix, and I have a fairly long commute, about 45 minutes here to and from work. I keep my car parked outside. So coming to work, I'll turn on the seat heater. I'll turn on my heat a little bit. I'll turn on my steering wheel heater for a little while. It's not that cold here in Phoenix. It
Feels cold
granted,
for us,
it feels cold for the Phoenicians. I grew up in Alaska. It's not that cold.
He's talking 40 degrees, by the way.
We're 40, 45 degrees. However, I also noticed my car's energy usage per mile jumped from about 300 to almost 400 watts per mile. And that's 40 degrees above zero. I can imagine it's somewhere in the 500 to 600 watt per mile range if you're getting to 0 degrees.
Interesting.
So it does use a lot more energy to run an electric vehicle in cold weather. ICE vehicles actually use more gasoline. They don't get as good a mileage in cold weather either. It's just not nearly as dramatic.
I have to precondition my diesel.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, in extreme cold, I got to put some type of anti-gel inside the fuel system. But like, what was it, like 2 weeks ago when we got down to like, I think 29 degrees here?
Yeah.
I mean, I got up and turned on my diesel and let it warm up. I mean, the last thing I want to do in an ICE engine is start it up and then hammer it down the 101, going 65, 70 miles an hour. And, the engine temperature is at like 70, 80, 90 degrees. I want that temperature up, and I want everything flowing, and nice and warm before I go and hammer it down.
You want viscosity.
He wants viscosity, and he's not taking the driving tips that we talked about last week. He's not going 101 miles an hour down the 101.
Now, I don't know what Niels is referring to here, but he says, as for Tesla Roadster, we will see.
I think that's for the mileage range. We'll see. The Roadster.
The new Tesla Roadster.
The new Tesla Roadster hasn't come out yet. We'll see. He makes a good point, though. The Cybertruck has been somewhat disappointing in tests, getting about 230 miles.
Right.
I did see, again, online this week, somebody who has put 10,000 miles on their Cybertruck already. And they talk about how they get, without towing anything, anywhere from 185 to about 245 miles of range. So they've been a little disappointed with it, too.
I think EV Fan sums it up well, too. People don't buy supercars to drive long range. More than 300 is unnecessary. Having owned a Ferrari for years, it wasn't a long-distance car. Even when we tried to go to California, you couldn't take any luggage with you. There's a little bit of a hatch in the back, and it might hold some golf clubs. But beyond that, and they're uncomfortable.
I looked up a stat for that, too, just so based on insurance companies reporting how often supercars get driven. Less than 3,000 miles a year, which means that people, if you drive every day, that's about 8 miles a day. Or if you drive it 1/10 of the year, 36 days of the year, that's still only 80 miles.
Yeah.
There's almost never an instance where a supercar is going to need to drive more than 300 miles.
Yeah. Agreed, EV Fan. I think you have a point there. Bill Wood says, when will Gruber come out with replacement battery for the Model X? We're not working on replacement batteries at this point, Bill. There are some people around the world that are. We'll talk about that in a Roadster podcast, actually.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're beginning to make some progress. One gentleman in Germany, for example, is using Porsche Taycan modules, battery modules, look like our Cybats in the critical power world. And he's been able to successfully get the firmware to communicate with a batch of batteries that are now fitting into the enclosure that's in the Tesla Roadster. The battery in the Roadster enclosure is a trapezoidal type of enclosure because it has to fit into a compartment that was designed for a ICE vehicle originally.
Right.
But there is some progress being made. It's going to be difficult for any kind of aftermarket activity because none of us can reach the scale that we need unless it's a very large company willing to go through cash burn to make an investment to get the volume built up for this type of product. And no one's been on the horizon yet that really looks like that kind of company.
Well, and with the Roadsters, at least, you've got a total market of, what, 2,000 cars?
2,000, we think, yeah.
Or somewhere around there. So that's a pretty small market to be making that big of an investment.
Yeah.
I'm impressed that there are people still out there making that investment anyway.
They have gone through the beta test and design stage. No one has yet begun to position for production.
Right.
And that's where everything changes, you know?
Yeah, that's where everything changes. Wayne Levitt has joined us today, and welcome, Wayne. He says, I've had my share of noisy engines that attract police.
Okay.
I've converted many Jaguar Series 1 and 2 and even 3 to Chevy 350, 400, and even a 454. Windsor and Cleveland and many more. I can't read the total. It looks like it goes off the edge of the page. My SI better.
He's saying my Model S is better, I think is what he's saying.
My S is better. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, that resonates with me. I had a Dodge Viper, ACR Viper, and I decided to tune it even further to make even more horsepower, you know, because I need more. Right? I always need more.
There's never enough.
Yeah. But when I had when I had headers built for it, the question came up, how noisy do you want this thing to be? And I said, make it as noisy as you want. And it was. But you know, back east, when I was a kid growing up, they used to issue tickets for loud noise mufflers. And they didn't have dB meters. It was very subjective, and the cop could actually decide whether you were too noisy or not. Believe me, the Harleys in town here would never have survived in Rochester, New York back then.
Not a chance.
I mean, even if you had a little exhaust leak, they would nail you sometimes if they decided it was your turn to get a ticket. You know?
Oh my gosh! Wow, yeah, that won't work around here. Nick Rudy has joined us this morning too, and he says he has a Kia EV6.
Okay.
It heats up as well, the battery, when it gets really cold, like now when it's around negative 20 degrees centigrade. He says now, right now, it's around minus 30 centigrade. So my drive to work was around 35 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers.
Okay.
So that's 350 watts per kilometer, or that's about 500 watts per mile for us in the U.S. Now, when it went to 0C, so up 30 degrees centigrade, all the way down to 21 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers.
Nick or Rudy, where do you live? That sounds really cold.
That does sound pretty cold, and that's a dramatic change in energy too.
Yeah. Bill Wood says, the way I understand it, if you use onboard navigation to supercharge, the Tesla will automatically start preconditioning the battery. But if you just plug the charger in, it has to precondition itself. Good point. So it actually is able to.
That's true.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As you're getting, I've heard of that too. If you use the Tesla navigation to go to the superchargers, as it gets close, it'll precondition the battery so that the car is ready to accept maximum charge when it gets there.
Question from VJ God Y says, how does Tesla BMS, battery management system, handle cell disbalancing or cell balancing? They have load resistors, and there's a microprocessor on all of the BMS boards that is polling constantly the bricks in the sheet or the module that it's controlling. And it's actually able to turn on and off load balancing resistors to try to keep a very little delta between the bricks. in the battery.
And that is true for all models of Tesla, as far as I know, too, right?
Yes. So we've got there's an article here about Tesla's Cybertruck 48-volt architecture, and the article basically says that it is no revolution. It's been around for a long time, or that notion or that idea. But Tesla pickup, or the Cybertruck, ditched the 12-volt battery with much fanfare. And what they say is that the automotive industry latched onto 12-volt electrical systems in the 50s, the last century, and hasn't changed since. And I remember working on older cars. They actually had 6-volt batteries, lead acid, of course. And the connecting wire going to the starter motor was massive. It was, thicker than my thumb, because it requires a lot of current. We'll talk about that in a moment, the relationship between voltage and current and Ohm's Law. But even hybrids and EVs with high voltage traction batteries still had 12-volt batteries to run things like window regulators, seat motors, headlights, and they don't mention this, but things like audio systems, the latches, the solenoids,
Sure.
and the lighting, the headlights. We did say that, yeah. And they say in the article, while we've seen several 48-volt mild hybrid vehicles over the years, Tesla was really the first to go 48-volt on a pure EV with the Cybertruck. And its marketing team wants you to know about that.
Oh, yes, they do.
So as, of course, Elon pointed out before, he said the entire supply chain, the entire design infrastructure is designed around 12 volts. That's why we've been stuck at this absurdly low number for such a long time. And this article also says it seems like another instance of Tesla breaking new ground, forcing legacy companies to play catch up. Think of the over-air software updates, and more recently, gigacasting. Isn't it amazing that a brand new Johnny-come-lately company is actually now forcing the century-old companies to adapt and to change and to adopt these new technologies and these new production methods?
It is pretty remarkable to see, and Tesla is definitely doing that.
So the technology here is, they say, why is upping voltage a good idea? Well, you don't want to go too high because you'd electrocute your mechanics. So we can't go to 400 volts, which would be the natural thing to try to achieve, since that's what's coming out of the battery, or even 800 volts.
Sure.
But now you'd have to have PPE to work on your car. You couldn't have a mechanic with bare hands and a metal wrench going in there to do any repairs. Well, it turns out Ohm's law tells us that voltage is equal to current times the resistance. So V equals I times R, I being current, R being resistance. Assuming a fixed resistance, raising voltage lowers the current. Lowering the current means you can use smaller wire to transmit the same amount of power. This saves weight, money, and improves the vehicle's efficiency. Higher current also corresponds to more energy lost as heat. So a 12-volt system is therefore not only inefficient at higher power levels, but requires components to have larger heat sinks than the high-voltage systems, or larger fans, or whatever it is they're drawing off heat with.
Sure.
Now, they say that automakers shifted from the 6-volt systems in cars to 12-volt electrics in the 1950s to address the growing power needs posed by more advanced electrical components, especially ignition systems for higher compression engines in the cars. But then they stuck with that. And the draw on 12 volts has become increasingly more robust, since we now have a lot of electronics in the cars. We have modules that are now drawing off 12 volts to power and run firmware, for example, run microprocessors. The main screen in your Tesla Model S or Y, or actually any of the Teslas, is powered again by 12 volts.
Sure.
And so the need to switch to something different became fairly, it was something that needed to be done in order to meet the requirements of these newer cars.
I had done some, this was an article I thought interesting enough. I went and read some of the comments on it. There were good arguments back and forth. The debate right now between old style and purists and the new technology adopters seems to be whether or not 48 volts is truly necessary in all cases. For example, they'll say, well, a door handle, it takes a watt or two. You're cutting your wattage from a watt to a quarter of a watt. Big deal. You're still using a really small wire. The bottom line, though, is that the people who don't like the change are using circular logic. They're saying they're pointing back to the idea that Tesla has had to put a lot of things into the Cybertruck to step down voltage to 12 volts because pieces don't exist that are 48 volts. They haven't been developed yet. And so they use that argument as the argument to go back to 12 volts.
Okay.
It's kind of like the status quo is out there. You have to accommodate it. Therefore, why not just go back to the status quo? It's like saying the status quo is out there. Therefore, you must keep the status quo. Right. In and of itself, and it doesn't make sense. That it's okay to increase complexity. It's okay to look forward. The main proponents are saying, yeah, but look at what can happen with 48 volts. There are so many things that just haven't been developed yet that are impractical in a 12 volt system, like a higher energy audio system. People say that the Tesla Cybertruck audio is next level, unworldly, unlike anything they've ever heard. Well, part of it's because it runs on 48 volts.
Interesting.
It can take and it can handle the extra power because it's getting higher voltage. It doesn't have to have that high wattage.
The compelling reason to stay at 12 volt was also fairly selfish because no auto manufacturer wanted to bite the bullet and pay higher cost for the 48 volt devices, because now you've got to change your headlights. You've got to change all your locks. And because those aren't produced in massive quantities yet and there's no scaling yet, those are going to be much more expensive. So again, Tesla was willing to bite the bullet, recognizing that it would increase their costs to attain a new level of efficiency that would later on pay off for them.
By all means. One other thing that I heard about that I thought was especially intriguing with my technology and IT background, of course, there are a lot of systems out there in the IT world that run 48 volt plus data across the same wires. Think power over Ethernet. Mm-hmm. How interesting is it to have a car that has all of these electric components that are communicating across the CAN bus to a central computing system that are all able to run their communications over the same wires that they're running power.
So you've got power over Ethernet, basically.
Something effectively
PoE,
like PoE, just that it's running across the car's CAN bus instead.
Fascinating. By the way, the whole 48 volt concept is not new at all. In fact, your landline telephones are all 48 volt.
Yeah, and they have been for generations. We can go back to 70, 80 years, and they're still running 48 volts.
And their way of doing uninterruptible power, UPS, which now is all solid state, of course, was batteries, lead acid battery rooms at 48 volt. You take 4 12 volt batteries, you have 48 volts, and that was their reserve power at the central offices for the various Bell companies.
And they weren't, because we do some of these batteries in some locations. These are not your mama's automotive batteries.
No.
These are 2,000-pound wet cell batteries that have hundreds of amp hours of capacity in some cases, and 12 volts.
And the actual jars, by the way, we service them, and we still have customers that use them. Yeah, they're about 3 feet tall, about this wide, and you can see the lead plates inside, and the liquid floating in there is sulfuric acid. Yeah. So you have to go out with a hygrometer and you have to check your pH level and either add, or subtract by putting in distilled water.
Yes.
And they were 2 volts per cell.
That's right.
So it's a great, amazing old technology that Tesla has been, again, being a pioneer and moving away from. Hendrik Eber says, "Yo, Pete and crew, thanks for joining us." And they shout out, yeah.
You want to read Hendrik's second comment to us as well?
Yeah. He says, "We need to go back to 6 volts and employ the boring company to drill through the body and doors. You know that makes sense. Yeah, that's true.
Funny comment. Great one. Wayne Levitt says, old cars were also positive earth.
Yes, I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me, Wayne.
Yeah. He says, I converted many to negative, polarizing the alternator and the regulator. VW Beetles were 6-volt with no electric anything.
Yeah. And of course, the whole plus minus concept is just a perspective. It really didn't matter. It's not that earth ground was always negative. It's what you decided it would be, you know, by driving a ground rod and hooking one or the other to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true. Positive ground. Yep.
That's right. Wow.
All right. So Volkswagen-backed Chinese OEM rolls out first sodium-ion battery electric car. This was a great headline. And, you know, it looks like a small little subcompact. I don't think we have a picture of it. Let's see if we have that. We do not. But that's okay. Picture a cross between a Beetle and a smart car. So in December 2023, Yiwei, a new EV brand under JAC Group, launched its first sodium-ion battery electric car in China. With a 50% stake in JAC's parent company, following a €1 billion investment in 2021, Volkswagen has demonstrated a continued commitment to EV technology, now controlling 75% of its existing EV joint venture. Now, this battery technology for Yiwei's sodium-ion battery electric car features sodium-ion cylindrical cells that are supplied by Hina Battery. It's probably Hina. We tend to want to make vowels long here. And a tech firm that is based in Beijing and affiliated with the Institute of Physics, Chinese Academy of Sciences. So again, we talk all the time, you know, what new battery technologies are emerging and are they actually being used in application? And here's a good example of that with a hefty, deep-pocketed financial backer, VW.
By all means, and this is where we were talking earlier. VW, in case you didn't remember, is the third largest EV maker in the world, behind only Tesla and BYD. Another, to me, really fascinating fact about this sodium-ion battery, with sodium being one of the four most plentiful elements on the earth, it's a very inexpensive battery to make. It's somewhere around 30 to 40% of the cost of a comparable lithium-ion battery. And yet the energy density, where a lithium battery is typically 160 watts per kilogram, this one's about 130 watts per kilogram.
Interesting.
So they're getting it up close to that lithium ion range with the new technology they've got. It seems like a really viable vehicle. It'll have about 150 miles of range.
And then it seems to me that the ultimate would be a graphene battery, because now we're using carbon, which we have way too much of on this planet at this point in time.
Yeah, and carbon, I believe, is the most prevalent element in the on Earth at this point in time. It's a matter of time.
Hey
it's
guys,
going to happen.
just so you know, we're running low on time for the show. We still need to talk about the full self-driving and also the Australian Chargers. Those two are in the title.
Okay. Well, let's go into full self-driving, Jesse. What do you think of that? The version 12.12, is that right?
Yeah, version 12's out. That's the one that runs on the neural network. And we'll talk more about that AI part of it on our Wednesday show.
Tomorrow, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so far people are still testing it, so we don't really have a whole lot of info on how it's performing, but it is exciting that it's finally out.
And again, it's a breakthrough technology. Instead of using hundreds of thousands of lines of rule-based code, you know, if you see an octagon red sign that's got STOP in the center, then you do this. What they ended up doing was tapping into their best drivers and emulating their driving habits and behavior. And so far, that seems to be a far more efficient and safe way to do self-driving. I'm interested to see how this one's going to work. I know that they've rolled it out to their beta tester program, which is outside of Tesla. It's the people who tend to be most enthusiastic Tesla supporters and have been doing beta testing of full self-driving for some time. Fred Lambert on Electric had quite a take on this. He's pretty skeptical. Is he? Yeah.
He is. And it's hard to argue the logic. He says this is 7 years late. It's on version 12, and it still hasn't been released to the public yet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Is this, and he says, until no one can convince me otherwise, this is probably Tesla's last best hope. And if they can't do it this time, what else is left?
It reminds me of the song, is this a real thing or just a fantasy?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you one thing about the problem with that logic, okay? And Fred
Sure.
Lambert was getting grilled by the whole community because of that headline.
Okay.
Because
Oh,
it was
yes.
a clickbait headline. It's been 100 years since ICE vehicles started, maybe more than 100 years. They haven't come up with self-driving. Tesla's done it in less than a decade.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good counterpoint. I agree.
It's a
Yeah.
counterpoint. It definitely is. You know, Fred's take was less of he's not excited about it and more of, if that's the case, why did Elon promise this to be delivered to customers 7 years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I don't know if I agree with Fred. I'm cautiously optimistic. I really hope for the best here. I've seen a little bit of what rule-based artificial intelligence versus neural net style artificial intelligence would do. This goes way back to when the IBM personal computer Junior was out. In the early 1980s. I'm in college. My college roommate is showing me his artificial intelligence concept that he's put onto a 128K PC Junior. And it's little more than a dot that goes around a maze and has to learn how to work through the maze. And at some point it gets food. At some point it experiences pain. But he's doing these really fascinating things on this computer that's not as nearly as powerful as this little smartwatch I have. And it's doing stuff that is frankly absolutely amazing that you could not even think to do on the computer because it was so space limited.
Right.
That gives me hope that the neural network concept will work well even with the older Tesla.
Fascinating. A couple other items here. Quick one. Tesla, again, broke the rules and decided to invite boats and ships and give them free internet, Starlink. And if you think about it, for 3 months, they're going to give them free service. It's brilliant. What these people are going to experience on these ships, on these boats, is a much improved version of internet connectivity without the latency issues, without the spottiness and all that. Mm-hmm. And are they really going to cancel their subscription after that? So again, hats off to Tesla for a brilliant marketing mind. And then we've got something about Australia and the charging there.
The Australian charging infrastructure has grown incredibly in 2023. Mm-hmm. The overall charging infrastructure grew by about 33%.
That was just for the last quarter.
I'm sorry, last quarter, not 2023.
It was 33% in the last quarter of 2023.
Amazing. All right.
I didn't get a chance to see how much that last quarter represented. You know, are we going from 10 chargers to 13 chargers, which is 33% growth? I don't think that, obviously, it's not something really small like that. I'm sure that it is just remarkable growth because Australia has been known for people having range anxiety because there isn't a good enough infrastructure there.
Gotcha.
Okay, guys, we got 1 minute to rapid fire. We have like 10 questions.
All right, Bill Wood, my 2016 X battery is getting 200 miles on a full charge now. When it gets low, maybe 175, can you repair it so it will get 235 like it was new? When these batteries start to drop, unless it's a resistive cell, you're dealing with impedance issues and there is no way to boost it back up.
Wayne Levitt says, I thought our phones in England and Australia were 12 volts.
It's quite possible. Yes, I don't know.
I know in the States it was 48 volts and still is actually for landlines.
The Daily Daza, the future is synthetic fuel, but the world doesn't want to know as they can't control and turn, I'm assuming, a profit on that.
It's synthetic fuel is going to be part of what's in our future. I can see fossil fuels eventually being not unnecessary.
Well, then Jesse will say fusion is the real answer for
the
any
real
of this.
future.
We don't need fuel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Robbie Schmidt says there's no need for batteries anymore. They released a self-sufficient independent generator.
Yeah, I'm going to look more into that.
Very interesting.
And then Hindafinga says, full self-driving equals Duke Nukem forever. My kids used to play that game. That's all I
That's
ever
great.
heard, yeah.
Mr. Regime says, I just got a VW ID5 and its range is about 280 miles.
Not bad.
Congratulations, and that's a great car.
And then Hendrik Eber says, Fred's comments are right, though. Some people have been paying it for years and still got nothing, especially in Australia.
Yeah, he's talking about full self-driving.
Full self-driving,
and that is one of the biggest complaints of people who paid for it, and then when they traded in their car, they were not allowed to transfer what they had paid for with full self-driving to the new car. They never got it.
Well, in 5 minutes, we're going into the Tesla Roadster podcast, and we're going to talk a bit also about the new Tesla second-generation Roadster. And if you think you've been waiting a long time for full self-driving, wait till you hear how long people have been waiting for that second-generation Roadster, some of which has put down large down payments.
Yes. So take care, and we'll look forward to talking to you in 5 minutes.
Thank you.